So today we're going to learn about sewing, and we're going to start with plastic canvas. This will help us get better at sewing and will lead us into sewing with fabric. When you're sewing with plastic canvas, we use yarn, and when we're sewing with fabric, we use thread. You can see the very big difference in size. So when you're sewing with fabric, you need a tiny little needle that has a very small hole in it for the thread. And this has to be small so it passes through the fabric easily. If you tried to use one of these giant darning needles, it's called a darning needle, if you tried to push this through fabric, it wouldn't really go very easily. It's also important that we're using fabric scissors. We don't share cutting paper with cutting fabric. There are different scissors that we use, and if we used fabric scissors on paper, they would get dull. So that means the opposite of sharp. We don't want to use fabric scissors on paper or they won't be very sharp anymore. You can see that the darning needle is not very sharp, and we don't really need it to be very sharp. It's not meant to go through fabric. It's meant to go through holes that are either in the plastic canvas, or if you're knitting or crocheting, then you'd use a darning needle to do some stitches at the very end. So there are different sizes of darning needle. They're not always this huge. Sometimes they're just bigger than what you would need for fabric sewing. They're a blunt tip. That means they're not very sharp, and we don't have to worry about hurting ourselves as much as we do on the very, very tiny needles that can be very pointy and sharp. Now, to get things threaded, that can be tricky. When you look at yarn, you can inspect it and notice that it's made up of lots and lots of little twisted fibers. And they're all twisted together to make a big, almost like a rope of yarn. So when you twist, you can tell if one direction's making it tighter and the other direction's making it looser. We want to find the direction to spin it and make it tighter, and that will help us get it through the head or the eye of the needle. The other trick is that instead of cutting straight across, if you cut at a diagonal, that can help you get it threaded more easily. There's two ways to do it. First, I'll start by twisting in the same direction to make it tighter. Then I'm going to pinch it between my fingers. I can barely see the top of the yarn. And I'm going to take the eye of the needle and saw back and forth. I'm pushing the needle onto the thread. When I let go of my thumb, I can just barely see the fibers or the threads start to come through the hole of that needle. I'm going to pinch the top above the needle and pull them through. It worked on this darning needle because the eye is quite large. But if I was working on a darning needle that was smaller, I want to show you how to use a needle threader. They could look metal, they could look plastic. There's lots of different types of needle threaders, but the way to use them, you have to be gentle because this part of the wire here can easily break off, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to push this through the hole, and this is a tool to help me just essentially bring that yarn through the needle head or through the eye. I'm going to push my yarn through it's just a bigger hole for me to get my yarn through. I'm going to push my yarn through the hole of the needle threader, and now that's just going to pull the entire thing through. If you pull too aggressively, this whole wire will snap. It's a very gentle tool, and there's a few of them, but you'll notice that if people are not gentle with them, they do break. When you're sewing, you need to have a little bit of a tail through the other side. We're not going to tie a double string like this and have it double over itself. Sometimes we do that when we're sewing, and it makes a stronger stitch so that we have 2 threads sewing. That's too much to use when it's yarn. So we want to just have a little bit of a tail. I like to do about the width of my palm. And what I'm gonna do is hold that with these 3 fingers. I'm closing those 3 fingers on top of the tail. So when I pull this whole piece through my plastic canvas, I'm not accidentally pulling my needle and having the yarn come loose. Then I have to stop and thread my needle all over again. Threading the needle can be very tricky, but I want you to try and try again. And if you get frustrated, don't forget to stop and take a breath. When we're doing plastic canvas art, we are going to draw a picture and color it in the way that you want to do it in yarn. So I look through my plastic canvas at my drawing, which I did on graph paper. It's like pixel art. You can see all the little graph paper. Then we're going to, we don't have to line our boxes up perfectly, but this is a good idea, is to start to draw your image onto the plastic. I like to use a black Sharpie for this, and I can look back at my picture to figure out which color yarn I need next. We're not going to cut this out. We're going to use this as a picture, and we're going to be sewing a picture. I'm drawing my sketch on here. So your drawing is going to be a guideline. It's not going to be exact. You're never going to have to line things up and count. But this is just a brainstorm of what picture I want to do on my canvas. Then I put it behind my canvas and trace with a black Sharpie. And again, it's not exact, but I did my best. And now I'm going to use this as a reference to look back at so that I know which color yarn to choose next. All of this background is going to be colored in with one solid color of yarn. Each of these, I'll switch colors of yarn when I get to them. This will be purple, this will be white. I haven't yet decided what color I'll do in the background, but we're basically drawing a picture with yarn. When we're sewing, we're going to do the running stitch. That's this one here. So when we're going up, down, or in, out, that's the pattern we follow. The only time we do the whip stitch is when we get to the edge. So the whip stitch is around, 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 around. So right now what we're gonna do is start with the running stitch and my red thread, and I skip the knot, and I'll show you why. I'm going to start my pincher fingers, and I'm going to hold the end of the thread with my thumb at the same time I'm holding the plastic canvas. I'm going to start by going down. Make sure you pull your thread almost all the way through, but hold that tail. I'm going to save that for later and tie my knot later. I'm going to go up to the next square that should be red. Whether it's this one or this one is up to you. You get to choose, you're the artist. Before you do your next stitch, make sure you pull the yarn all the way through except the tail. Keep holding the tail. I'm going to go in, out, up, down until I fill the whole red space or I run out of yarn, whichever comes first. When I run out of red yarn, I'm going to just need to put on more yarn onto my needle. Now that I've got 1, 2, 3 stitches, I can let go, and this is a little bit sturdy. It's enough to not come out if I don't pull aggressively. I'm just gonna pull enough to where my yarn stops. If it starts to loop around the corner and it gets knotted, make sure you untangle all of your knots before you keep going. As I pull through to the other side, I'm making sure that I'm pinching the tail just under the needle, off the edge of the needle. I'm pinching those both pieces together, because otherwise, if I don't, as I pull my needle through, the tail will come out. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen. When you are flipping over back and forth, it's good to check the front and the back and make sure that you don't have any knots as you're progressing through. Keep pulling your stitch all the way through before you do your next stitch. And all you're going to do is up, down, up, down, up, down. When you run out of thread or yarn, we're going to tie another piece on and keep going. I'm going to twist this and decide which way makes it tighter. I'm going to pinch this and cut at an angle. I'm going to put my needle threader through my needle. I'm going to be careful not to break it, and I'm going to push my yarn through the larger hole that's in the threader. If I need a helping hand, I can use another needle to help push it through. Or sometimes I'll get tweezers to help grab it from the other side. Once I've got a little bit of a tail, I'm gonna pull it through, not too rough, be gentle, and then I can start to finesse it off the end. I've got my tail. I'm going to leave the tail long so that my needle doesn't untie itself. I'm going to figure out which side's the back and start there. And I'm going to start filling in my next color. I'm leaving a tail that's about 4 fingers long. And then I'm just going to start coloring in this section with stitches. It's important that you go to the very next hole, not the same hole. If I go back through the same hole, what's going to happen is my thread's going to come all the way out and I won't make a stitch. So if you spy how I have one piece of plastic in between and I go right to the very next hole, I can go diagonal, I could go across, or I could go down. And it's your choice. You're the artist. You get to choose. But the whole time you're going up, down, and jumping to a hole that is touching or next to wherever you're sewing. I'm going to jump down. if it's diagonal or it's across, as long as it's touching the hole that you're coming up through, then it's okay to jump down through either this one here or here. I could jump to any of these because all three of these are touching the hole that I just came up from. And I'm going to try and stay in the area that I Sharpied. When I got to the end of my red section, I'm going to turn around. I still have yarn, so I'm going to keep going back up. And I just need to fill this whole section with red. I'm going to keep going until all of the red space is sewn. Then I'll switch to another color and fill my next section. Okay, I want to stop and show you how I went this way with my yarn, stopped and turned around and came back. I'm still filling in my red section. Stopped and turned around and came back. I'm still on the same string of red yarn. And I'm right here in the middle. This section right here gets smaller, so I don't want to fill this area here. This, in my picture, I can see this area here should be orange. So what do I do? How do I get from here all the way back over to here where I need to keep filling in more red? My red was thicker on this side and this side than it was at the top. I want to show you how to end a section. I'm going to go once underneath this loop. I'm trying to lift up that stitch and wiggle my needle between the plastic and that stitch. I'm going to pull through one time and then I'm going to cut. That's it. Now these are not getting used, they're not pillows we're sleeping on, they're just artwork that are going to be hanging on a wall. They're decorative, so we don't need to use knots. I'm going to go back and take out my yarn and show you how to go back and add, make sure that this tail is long enough so that you can do this. At the beginning, we didn't tie a knot, we just made a tail. So now that I've ended that yarn, I need to go back in and make sure that this is secure because there's no knot. I'm going to put the yarn through. I'm going to put my needle threader through the needle. Now I'm going to put the yarn through that hole. When I pull the needle threader through the needle hole, I'm threading that. And now I need to do the same thing. I didn't leave my tail long enough, so I can't turn my needle all the way around to reach through. I need to get it through one of these stitches. I'm going to turn my needle around and back it through one of these stitches. All I want to do is on the back side, ooh, good thing I double checked. I'm on the front side right now. I need to find the back side because there's my, not really a knot, but that's where I ended my stitch. So I'm going to put my needle through so that the yarn comes back on the other side, on the back side. This is where all of my endings are going to be, on this side. And my needle can barely get through. If I push much further, it's going to untie itself. It's going to come out of the needle. So instead of turning around and using the needle the front way, how I normally would if I had enough yarn, I'm going to just use the back, the tail end of it, and dive under this stitch here. And that's how I'm going to end it. Wiggle up so that you're getting under the yarn, under the stitch, and between the stitch and the canvas. I leave a tiny little tail, and there's my other tail. So there's my two endings. I know that this side is the back. I can also tell this is the front because this is the side my Sharpie's on. So now I need a little bit more red over here, but I wanted to stop there and jump over to this other section and add more red over here. So I'm not done with my red yet. I'm gonna twist my yarn again. I'm gonna cut at an angle. I'm going to first put this through the needle. The needle threader goes in first. Then I can put my yarn through the needle threader. And that helps me pull it through the eye. I don't need very much here, but I need to have more than just a tiny little piece because I have to have enough time, tail to start and stop and be able to end it with this stitch. So why don't I start from the back this side? And that'll make it easier for me to finish my tail when I have to come back. And I'm gonna leave, that's like 4 fingers long of how much of a tail I'm leaving. I'm pinching it with my pincher fingers, and I'm gonna jump back up to fill this space with the running stitch. Remember, the running stitch is just in, out, in, out, in, out. Can I go back over a hole that already has yarn in it? Sure. If it needs to be done to get me to another space that I haven't filled in yet, no problem. I'm not going to keep going back and forth over a space I've already filled in with color. But if I have to just once or twice, like now I could jump through this hole right here. There's already yarn in it. I could go back through that again, no problem. If that's helping me turn around and turn the corner to come back down, all I need to do is fill in the rest of this red. And then I can be done with this color. Here's an example. I'm gonna jump back up through this hole. There's already yarn in it, but I can come through it again, no problem. I can end now. It looks like when I flip it over and look at the front, there's no other spaces of red that I need to cover. And I'm going to dive back under one of these stitches. And once I pull through, that's it. I can cut my tail. Now I need to tie or secure the original tail, the beginning. So after I pull off my yarn, I have to rethread again. Sewing takes a lot of patience. There's a lot of threading and stitching and unstitching, and everybody makes mistakes. Then you have to go back and take things apart and try again. If you get frustrated, it's okay to just put it down and take a few breaths. Maybe take a walk and see what other people in the class are working on, how far they've gotten, and then come back to it in a minute. So now I'm through this other beginning tail. My needle is threaded, and I'm going to dive my needle under that stitch and wiggle the stitch up to try and get my needle between the stitch and the plastic. And then I'm pulling through, and that's it. Now I can switch to orange as my next color. When you're sewing in plastic canvas, as a beginner, it's important that we don't choose yarn that's too funky. Like this one's gonna be really, really tricky for me as a beginner. I'm gonna put that aside and choose something that looks more like a regular piece of yarn. Also, if I found one that was very, very stretchy, this is like accordion stretchy yarn. This is probably gonna be really, really tricky for me to get threaded. So I'm gonna put this one aside and choose some regular yarn. So what happens if my yarn gets tangly and I have a knot? I need to stop and gently untie it before I keep going. That's really important. I need to make sure that I'm pulling my thread or yarn all the way through before I make the next stitch. Sort of like driving a car and you're going in the direction of your lines. Now, if I had a creature that was like, let's say a frog or a bunny that I was doing, and I had a big section that was all one color, I could drive my car this way and stay straight as I filled it in, instead of following the bend like I am doing on my rainbow. Everyone's stitches will go in a different direction, but it's important that you're just following your own picture, and everyone's will look slightly different from each other. And of course, every artist is different. All right, y'all, I know this has been a very long lesson and listening, but sewing does take a long time, and you have to be patient with it. The only way to get better at something is to practice and to keep doing it. So I'm going to show you the back side with all the knots, and I'm going to show you the front side that's more smooth. And I kept going in a brick layout, sort of like one line at a time for the background. And when I bumped up against my design or my rainbow, I would turn and go back and fill it all in, just like Tetris. When you run out of yarn, you can then fill in the next section. You can cut, make a knot at the back, and then cut and start your next section. It's okay to jump around in between switching yarn, but when you are stitching, you should stay to the very next box. Don't skip around unless you are cutting, tying, threading a new piece, and then you could start from a different area. The very last thing I did was the whip stitch, which was all the way around the edge. And you can see sort of up close if the cutout, because this is a grid or boxes, if there's a little bit of the cutout sticking out, your yarn will sort of fit right into those little nooks. And if the grid is straight across, then you'll just wrap your yarn and jump into the very next box. You will be double dipping into each box, because if you've gone straight with the running stitch, and now you're coming back with the whip stitch, you'll be diving back into that hole for a second time. It's a little bit hard to see, but just do your best, go slow, forgive yourself for making mistakes. Ask 3 friends at your table for help before you ask me, because I don't want you to spend your whole class in line waiting for me. There are going to be a lot of people that need help with this project. So I've got all of your yarn cut and wrapped along popsicle sticks, so you can choose which colors you want. They're cut, but you will be doing some practicing with threading needles. Good luck, have fun, and if you get frustrated, take a little break and then pick your artwork back up again. Don't give up. All right, we're all gonna get through this, and just do your best.